Good morning, guys. Hope you're all doing great. So today we are going to have a small session on the physiology of basal ganglia. So this is a very important topic for your physiology CNS exam, right? So that's what we're going to discuss today. Okay. So how many of you can hear me? If you can hear me, just put in the comment box. Okay. So all right, so today our topic is only on the basal ganglia. Yesterday, if you had seen the session in the morning, you would be knowing that we were discussing about the anatomy of basal ganglia, right? So yesterday it was just about the anatomy, that is the structures, parts, everything in the basal ganglia. So today we are going deeper in detail about all those structures, and we'll be talking about all those functions which are importantly performed by basal ganglia. Okay. So why is this basal ganglia very important? See, this is actually thought to be a vague topic, but it is not at all, because this is such an interesting part in the brain. Okay, because once you know the functions which the basal ganglia is performing, then you will be awestruck by how is it actually doing all of the important things in your body, right? So right now in the picture, what you're seeing is the basal ganglia, right? This highlighted part. So that's the basal ganglia. Okay, if you can see here, right? If you can see this brown region or the golden brown color, that is the basal ganglia, right? Here's this. So just to give a gross idea of where this basal ganglia is located, I've just put this picture. Okay, so let's just break down this term basal ganglia. This basal ganglia is termed this way because of its composition and its location. Okay, so first, what is a ganglia? Ganglia is nothing but these are clusters of nuclei or cyton or gray matter present within the medulla of the brain. Okay, so let's simplify that. We all know cortex is made of gray matter, medulla is made of white matter. So that's how it's made in the brain. Now, if there are some gray matter present within the medulla, we call them ganglia. Okay, so sometimes nuclei may be present in clusters in the white matter, and that's what we call as the ganglia. Okay, so basal ganglia is one such ganglia, a very important ganglia. Now this is present in the base of the brain. Okay, so if you can see the picture, you could appreciate it. It's in the base of the brain, so we call it the basal ganglia. Okay, so that's about the name. Now let us see a scenario. Okay, right. So let's imagine you're in a forest and a tiger is coming in front of you. Okay, so what will be our immediate action? We will try to rush away from the place. So we will try to escape from there. So how we escape? So all that we do is immediately we turn back, then we run. So we run like, as fast as we can. So that's what we will do. And in case the tiger is coming very close to you, you will try to get inside some hut or anything which is present. So you will try to protect yourself. That is ultimately your body will do everything that will protect you from the tiger. Okay, but let us just make the same situation in a slow motion. Okay, like I just want you to imagine each and everything that we will do while we are trying to protect ourselves. So what will we do? There will be more importance given to the motor activities. That is, our body has to function. The legs have to run. So the legs have to run so that we can rush out of the place. So the muscles in the leg, the muscles of both the limbs, because when running we also need the help of the hands, and the heart has to pump faster. So a lot of such activities are happening. And if you can just correlate the same situation with another thing which we have learned in physiology, we would all say it is flight, fight, and fright hormones activity, right? So I think you'll be remembering it. So can anybody of you name which is that hormone which is regarded as the flight, fright, and flight hormones? So if you can remember, just put in the comment box, right? So that is one important physiological correlation in this scenario. But there's one another extremely important thing which we don't most often talk about. That is the involvement of basal ganglia here. Okay, so let us say the tiger is coming in front of you. You're standing there. Now you're thinking, okay, if you guys have watched this ENPT movie, that is Enenoki Payun Tota movie, you will be knowing about those dialogues, right? So it'll be like when the hero encounters something, he'll be starting from the flashback. So I'm here, somebody surrounding me. Like every single thing, he'll be literally telling it. Then only he will do some action, right? So just the same thing. Let's correlate it here. The tiger is coming in front of you and you're telling, okay, oh my god, tiger is coming in front of me, what should I do? Now I'm in a forest, so surrounding there are no areas to protect myself, so I have to run. So if I have to run, I have to make my limbs move. So if I have to make my limbs move, all the muscles in my lower limb have to function. So if you keep thinking this way, not even just in a second, you will be caught and eaten by the tiger, right? So we all know this. Okay, very good, Harini. That's catecholamines. Yes, the adrenaline, noradrenaline, and all. Okay, right. So if you would do this thing like step by step, if you would think, what should I do next? So I should make this muscle to contract. I should make the other muscle to relax. Then I should make my heart pump faster. So if you keep thinking this way, the tiger will eat you up. But we all know that when we are in such an emergency situation, things happen in an unconscious way. You do not know how you did it, but your body will do it, right? So such subconscious movements which your body is doing in such emergency situations is mainly controlled by the basal ganglia. So next time, if you see some similar example, when you're learning about the catecholamines also, you have to recollect this basal ganglia, okay? So in the brain's level, it is the basal ganglia which helps you escape from the location when a tiger or something tries to catch you. There's another correlation, okay? So look at here in the picture. A baby is running in front of a car. Okay, a car is coming at a great speed. Now you are the driver of the car. What will you do? Immediately you will try to apply the brake so that you can save the baby. Right. So how will you do it? It just happens unconsciously, which means not exactly unconscious. You will do it subconsciously, right? So as you see the baby, you will apply the brake. But if you are a newly learning driver, then you will have to think about how to apply the brake. So first you will know, first we have to think, okay, I have to take the leg from I have to take my feet from the accelerator. Then I have to place or press my feet on the clutch. Then I have to place my feet on the brake, and then I have to apply the brake, right? So this is how a new driver will think of, like somebody who is learning to drive. But if you are getting used to driving, that is after many times of driving, things will happen unconsciously, subconsciously. So when you every little action that you do, like when you're changing the gear, you don't have to think like I have to apply the clutch, I have to take my feet from the accelerator, then I have to apply the gear, then I will again take off the clutch, right? So such things will happen subconsciously. But when you are a new learner, it will happen like you will be consciously observing every movement that you do, right? So again, the same thing is here. Initially, when you're learning some pattern of activity, it will be consciously done by your brain. Okay, it is by the cortical part, that is cortex of the brain. But when you keep repeating the same pattern of motion or pattern of motor activity, what will happen is your basal ganglia will come into action. It will start doing the functions by itself. Like you will not think, but subconsciously you will do, right? So again, such a scenario also is having basal ganglia in its major role. All right. So, okay, the man's face in this picture, I just want you to answer here. So I've given some 5 options of emojis. Just answer me which option of emoji suits the best for the expression of this man's face. Just give one option which you think suits the best representing the expression of this man on face. Okay, so why have I put this picture? I'll tell you after you answer. So the thing is, just before we talked about the tiger situation and the car, right? In both the cases, we mentioned that basal ganglia is fundamental. It's extremely important to do those activities. But in case, let's imagine your basal ganglia is not functioning properly. Then The fact is that if your basal ganglia is not functioning properly, you will not be allowed to drive a car. Firstly, you will also not drive a car. And again, if your basal ganglia is affected, you will not be going to a forest at all, right? So these are slow and gradual changes. They don't happen in a while, okay? Right. So that's one thing you should know, okay? Then what actually will happen if your basal ganglia goes off? It causes multitude of diseases or disorders, okay, in the body, which we will see in a couple of minutes, okay, before the end of the session, right? So what you're seeing in this picture is also representing one such condition, which is caused due to some lesion or some abnormal functioning of the basal ganglia, okay? So yeah, very good. Hansi, Harini, Pallavi, all of you are right. It is option C. Actually, Shivam Monish Kumar, it is not the sad expression that the person is showing. Okay, he's not showing any expression at all. Okay, if he's sad, you could see it clearly, but here he's like he has no expression, right? So that's a neutral expression, right? So this person is a patient of Parkinson's disease. Some of you might have heard the name. If you do not know it, doesn't matter. We'll learn it in a short while. Now, this person is a patient of Parkinson's disease. So he is not showing any expression in the face. Okay, it's not that only when this photograph was taken, all the time, the whole day, he will be like this, showing no expression. If you say some joke, he will not laugh. If you make him angry, he'll not show that expression. If you make him cry, still he will not show that, this feeling of pain and all. His face will be all the time just like this, neutral, no expression, right? So this face is called as mask face. Okay, it's a typical clinical feature of Parkinson's disease. Now just get sensitized with the name Parkinson's disease and mask face. Okay, so this is one of the conditions which occurs when the basal ganglia is affected. All right. So here's the preview of today's class. First, we have seen a little bit of the introduction. Then we will refresh about the components that has been discussed yesterday. Okay, components of basal ganglia. Then afferent and the efferent connections of basal ganglia. It's very, very, very important for your exam. Then feedback circuits. It's good to know them. Then functions of basal ganglia. This is the most important and interesting part also. Okay. So apart from these, this car driving and this tiger trying to catch you, apart from those situations, there are also many other functions that will be interesting for you. Then we'll see disorders which might occur, like Parkinson's. Finally, we'll have a little revision and we'll see what's important for your exams also. All right, so now let's get into the components. Okay, so if you had seen the session yesterday, there would have been discussion on the anatomical parts of the basal ganglia, right? So for us, the anatomical classification is not very important because we are concentrating on the physiological aspect. Okay, so look at here, this is a sagittal section of a brain, right, with the complete basal ganglia at the center and base of the brain. Okay, now here this blue color part which is shown in the picture is the basal ganglia, right? So this picture is just to show you the relations of the basal ganglia, like what are the nearby structures. So I'm just highlighting the same blue part again. So this is the basal ganglia, okay, right, this blue color zone. Now adjacent to that, if you could see this violet color part, okay, this violet color is the thalamus, okay, this zone which is marked here, it is the thalamus, okay, right. So below the thalamus or below the basal ganglia, what do we have? We have hypothalamus here, right, and amygdala. So all these terms are new for you. It doesn't matter. Don't get panicked by the new terms. Just get sensitized with the terms now. Then once you practice memorizing these words, it will become very easy for you. Okay. So amygdala. Amygdala is a center for emotions. Okay. Now these are the ones you should know. So superiorly, we have a huge cerebral cortex. Then basal ganglia encloses the thalamus within it, the violet color part. Then below the basal ganglia, we have the hypothalamus and amygdala. Right. Okay. Now let us see this picture. All right. So concentrate on this picture. This is very important for you. So this is a picture showing the coronal section of the brain. Okay. So here what could you see? the same basal ganglia but in a different aspect. Okay. So yesterday, if you had seen the session, the anatomical classification was discussed and that included 3 parts. Okay, what were the 3 parts? Can anybody remember what are the 3 anatomical parts or components of the basal ganglia? Okay, if you would say, it will be good, but we don't need that. So we don't need that in physiology, but I just want you to remember it so that you don't get confused when you write anatomy and physiology. Okay, so here are the components of basal ganglia in physiology. Seems like no one remembers the anatomical classification. All right, okay. So the components are caudate nucleus. First, it's caudate nucleus. Now, this concentrate is very, very important. These 2 parts, these are the caudate nucleus. Then, look here, it is putamen in the zone. This is putamen. Okay, I'm just highlighting it. This is putamen. All right. Then, within the putamen or medial to the putamen, we have a structure called globus pallidus. Okay, globus pallidus. Then, we have got a structure called substantia nigra. Okay, substantia nigra. And just above the substantia nigra, we have subthalamic nucleus, or the other name of subthalamic nucleus is subthalamic body of Lewis. Okay, I'll just show you the word in a different place. Now just know the names. See, one more thing, basal ganglia is a bilateral structure. Okay, so left side is symmetrical to the right side. Okay, now caudate, I'm just repeating. First, we have caudate nucleus, right? On the superior most aspect, we have caudate nucleus. Then we have putamen, which is the lateral part. Then medial to the putamen, we have globus pallidus. Then coming below, on the inferior aspect, we have got 2 structures, subthalamic nucleus, and below the subthalamic nucleus, we have substantia nigra. Okay, right. So I want to show one more structure here, which I mentioned you before. This part, okay, this is your thalamus. Okay, this part which I'm highlighting now, this is the thalamus. Okay, so I mentioned you, thalamus is enclosed by the basal ganglia. So another thing is we call this nucleus below the thalamus as subthalamic nucleus because it's below the thalamus. Okay. Very good, Abhinav and Pallavi. You are remembering those anatomical structures. Very good. So as Pallavi has mentioned, it's corpus striatum, claustrum, and the amygdala or amygdaloid body. So these are the 3 parts according to anatomy. But in physiology, we have corpus striatum only included. Okay. So what is this corpus striatum actually? Because see, the classification which they have put in the comment box, it is different from what we are seeing now, which means anatomically we saw something else, now we are seeing something else. How could it be possible? The same organ which is dealt in anatomy and physiology being different? Your doubt is right. Actually, there is a correlation. So first, let us know what is corpus striatum. So corpus striatum is nothing but these 3 parts. I mean, the caudate nucleus, okay, the caudate nucleus, the putamen, and the basal ganglia together constitute the corpus striatum. Okay. So in anatomy, we just learned them as just corpus striatum, but in physiology, we are seeing them in detail. Caudate nucleus, putamen, and globus pallidus. Together, the 3 will constitute the corpus striatum. Okay. Then there's another thing to know here. This corpus striatum can be classified in 3 ways. First is what we have seen now. It can be caudate nucleus plus putamen plus globus pallidus. The second classification is it can be divided as the caudate nucleus and the lenticular nucleus. Okay, I've written it below the corpus striatum, right? So it can be divided into caudate nucleus and lenticular nucleus. Now the thing is, listen, concentrate here because it will be a little confusing if you miss out any points which I'm telling now. So this slide, concentrate. Okay. So corpus striatum, the second classification is caudate nucleus plus lenticular nucleus. So just like mathematics, let us see. I'm telling caudate plus lenticular. So caudate is already here. Okay, caudate is already here. So what are the other 2 ones left? Putamen and globus pallidus. So lenticular nucleus is nothing but putamen plus globus pallidus. Okay, it's very simple. Caudate nucleus is already there. So we said the other part is lenticular nucleus. So lenticular nucleus is nothing but putamen and globus pallidus together. Okay, shall I mark it in the diagram? Okay, right. So let me show that. So putamen and the globus pallidus together form the lenticular nucleus. Okay, done. Now the other classification we have is here based on the phylogenetic aspect. We can divide the corpus striatum into paleostriatum and neostriatum. Okay, paleostriatum and neostriatum. Paleo means older one and neostriatum is the newer one. So based on the evolutionary perspective, we are dividing that way. Okay, so what is this paleostriatum and what is neostriatum? Now again, it's simple. Paleostriatum is nothing but the globus pallidus. Okay, this is your paleostriatum. Globus pallidus is the paleostriatum. Then what is the neostriatum? What is left out? That is neostriatum. Okay, so putamen plus caudate nucleus together form the neostriatum. Got it? Right? So that's it. It's very simple, but it'll be little confusing for you now. Doesn't matter. I'm just repeating it for you. First, whenever it is asked in the question or whenever somebody asks you what is the classification of the structures or components of the basal ganglia, you would mention 5 words. Okay, caudate nucleus, putamen, globus pallidus, and the substantia nigra. Along with that, we have subthalamic body of Lewis, right? Okay, done. So then there is another classification. We can call it as corpus striatum plus substantia nigra and subthalamic body of Lewis or subthalamic nucleus. Okay. So now corpus striatum can be divided in 3 ways. Corpus striatum can be said to have caudate nucleus, putamen, and globus pallidus, right? Together, all the 3. Or corpus striatum can be divided into caudate nucleus plus lenticular nucleus. Or it can be divided into paleostriatum and neostriatum, right? So the thing is, if you want to recollect it without missing out any points, just you have to memorize the ones which I've underlined now. So when corpus striatum is asked, corpus has 3 parts or 2 parts caudate and lenticular, or 2 parts paleo and neostriatum. Then just correlate with the first and the second one. You will get to know that lenticular is made of putamen and globus pallidus. Then compare the third and the first one. Again, all that you need to remember is paleo is globus pallidus. Okay, just words are rhyming, no? Pallidus, paleo. Okay, in that way, remember paleo is pallidus. So the remaining 2 are going to constitute the neostriatum. So it's as easy as that, right? Okay, now let us just see the same in this diagram. So this is showing the location of the basal ganglia. Now here we can appreciate 3 things. The parts of the basal the parts of the caudate nucleus. Okay. So here we go. There are 3 important parts. The head of the caudate nucleus, the body of caudate nucleus, and we have got the tail of the caudate nucleus. Okay. So this is the head, body, and the tail. Okay. Then here this blue color zone shows the lenticular nucleus. So can anybody say what is lenticular nucleus made of? Lenticular nucleus is equal to dash plus dash. It is made of 2 structures out of those 5 components which we mentioned. Can anybody recollect it? This is the lenticular nucleus. Okay, and the red color one shown in the diagram is the thalamus. Okay, so if you know this, that's enough. Right. So this is another picture. So previously in this picture, we were able to see only the 3 components of basal ganglia. The 2 other components are subthalamic nucleus and the substantia nigra, which you can see only after removing the lenticular nucleus. Okay. All right. Very good, Sriniti and Melvin. It's putamen and globus pallidus. Okay. So what I'm telling now is only if you remove that putamen and globus pallidus, we can see the subthalamic nucleus or the substantia nigra. Right? So this one and this one can be seen only if you remove the lenticular nucleus. Right. So then let us see about the connections which the basal ganglia has. Right. So because it's new for you, it'll be heavy now, but if you just revise it twice, you will it'll become very easy for you, right? Okay. So connections. Why is connections very important here in basal ganglia? Because the basal ganglia is performing a lot of functions in the body, right? Like motor activity, also non-motor activity. But this is not executed directly by the basal ganglia. It is a kind of regulator system in the human body. Okay. So if you take lower animals, basal ganglia is the most important part for motor activities. But by evolution, for us, the cortex has been well developed. And that is the reason why we are, as humans, we are able to think a lot of things. And this cognition is very, very, very helpful for us. And all those minor activities, like, the fine stuffs, we call it fine motor activities. All of them are controlled by the cortex. So in humans, the cortex is well developed. So basal ganglia is just an additional one, but not the most important thing. So I hope you get the picture. In animals, basal ganglia is very important, but in humans, basal ganglia performs its function by connecting with different parts of the brain, with the cortex, with the thalamus, and many other parts in the brain, right? So it's mainly a regulator. Now, if you see this picture, what you can see here is this is the basal ganglia, right? I just marked it in green color. This is the basal ganglia. The other two which are present outside is the cortex, and then we have the thalamus. Okay, cortex in the superior aspect and thalamus here. Okay. Now let us see the connections. The connections can be divided into three groups. The afferent connections. What is afferent? This one, afferent. Then efferent. So this is the output from the basal ganglia. And then we have also got internuclear connections. Okay, this is very important. Internuclear connections, which means there are a lot of connections present within the nuclei inside the basal ganglia, right? So we mentioned 5 components in the basal ganglia, right? So these 5 components interact with one another. So that is forming the internuclear connections. Now let us see the names of these connections. Right. Once you know how it is named, it is not at all different into the connections. One more thing I want to say: inflow, or the important input site of the basal ganglia, is nothing but the striatum. Okay, striatum is the most important part which receives impulses or any connection from outside the basal ganglia. So the important afferent component is basal ganglia. I'm sorry, the striatum. The important efferent or the output part of the basal ganglia is globus pallidus. Okay, remember these two. I'll ask you a question on the same in a short while. Okay, so afferent or the input part is the striatum, output part is the globus pallidus. Okay. So in this picture, the caudate and the putamen together, they form the striatum. All right. So afferent connection means from some different part of the brain, the connections are coming and reaching the striatum. So what are the two such important parts? Corticostriatum and the thalamostriate. The fibers are called corticostriate and thalamostriate, meaning the fibers are received from cortex of the brain and thalamus of the brain by the striatum, right? So that's what you can see in the picture. Here's the cortex. So cortex is sending some impulse to the striate, that is corticostriate. Thalamus sends some impulse to the striate, that is thalamostriate, right? Okay. Now, what are the efferent connections? So efferent connections, which is the output part. So guys, can you remember? Just now I said you which is the output part, most important output part of the basal ganglia. So that is what forms the fiber here. So the output mainly goes to the thalamus. Okay. From here, the output goes to thalamus. From here, it goes to thalamus. Right? It's from the pallidal part. So it's nothing but Globus Pallidus. Yeah, very good, Pallavi and Shiva Monish Kumar, right? So it is from the Globus Pallidus, it goes to Thalamus. Then the less significant one is Nigrothalamic. Nigrothalamic means it's coming from what? Substantia nigra. Okay. So all these names are from the components name only. So it's once you get to know the name of the components in a flow, it will be very easy for you to write these connections. So there were two afferents and two efferents. Those are the important ones. Now we have internuclear connections, right? So internuclear connections. Now, as I read the names, you can understand yourself what is connecting, which connection is connecting which two parts of the basal ganglia. So striatonigral means the fiber goes from the striatum to the substantia nigra, right? So that's one thing. Then appear opposite from from the substantia nigra, if it comes to striatum, then we call it nigrostriatal. Third one is striatopallidal. So striato means from the striatum it goes to the globus pallidus. The nigropallidal is coming from substantia nigra, it goes to globus pallidus. Now as I am reading it, just you can also tell it yourself how the fibers are going. Now the next one is globus pallidus to the subthalamic body of Lewis. So it's difficult to shorten this name as a prefix or a suffix to the subthalamic body of Lewis, and that's why we are mentioning it fully. Okay. So globus pallidus, especially externa. So one more thing you should know, globus pallidus, we know that it is present medially, right? It is a part of the it is a part of the lenticular nucleus. Now, globus pallidus, in turn, it is divided into two parts, the outer part and the inner part. Okay, the inner part is called interna, the outer part is called externa. Now, that externa part is what sends the connection or fibers to the subthalamic body of Lewis. Then, from subthalamic body of Lewis, just opposite update globus pallidus varudhu, and then we have got same subthalamic body of Lewis sending stimulus to substantia nigra. Okay, so if you could just imagine the same in the picture, there's nothing that that you have to read again in this topic. Okay, so you need to memorize the component's name, then you need to imagine yourself from where the fibers go to which place. Okay, now this picture is to show you the connections again, but here we are going to stress about another important factor called neurotransmitters. So you guys might have heard this term, neurotransmitters. These are nothing but certain secretions or substances which are released by neurons. Okay, so they are released by the neurons in the synaptic cleft or the synapse, wherein the neurotransmitter will go and bind to the receptors present on the next neuron. So in previous some sessions back, we discussed about synapse. So in that session, we explained in detail about how the neurotransmitter is functioning, right? So there are so many different types of neurotransmitters. Okay, so here we are mentioning connections, right? So every such connection has a specific neurotransmitter involved in that connection. Okay, that is also very important. So there are four such important neurotransmitters. Here I have listed it: dopamine, GABA, glutamate, and acetylcholine. Okay. Now, I'm not going to tell, you're going to tell me which is released by or which is involved in which connection. Okay, I'm just, for an example, let me tell you, dopamine. Dopamine is released by which part? So, when you see the picture, you could see substantia nigra pars compacta. Okay, it's nothing, you don't much focus on this pars compacta, just see substantia nigra. So, substantia nigra is sending some connection to the striatum, right? This blue color and the orange color lines. So they are sending their connection to some receptors, okay? D1, D2 receptors. So D1, D2 receptors are nothing but dopamine receptors. So they take up dopamine, which means substantia nigra releases dopamine, and this dopamine is reaching the striatum. Okay, hope you're clear with this point. Now you will tell me which part releases GABA. Okay, I'm marking the arrow marks here, and with that you have to tell me which part or which structure here is releasing GABA, right? So here is GABA. So GABA is coming from, you can see GABA is here. Then we can see GABA here, you can see GABA. Now, can you just make your brain function and tell me which part is actually releasing GABA? Just give a guess. Name the component in the basal ganglia by seeing this picture. Which part is releasing the GABA? Very good, Shiva Manish Kumar. It's corpus striatum. There's another part. What is the other part? Yeah, Jenica, Harini, everybody. Okay. What is the other part? Okay, as you have said one part, I'll tell the other one. It is globus pallidus. Okay, the lateral and medial globus pallidus. Okay, don't focus on this lateral and medial now. For now, just keep it globus pallidus. Yeah, very good, Harini. Hansi, everybody. So it is the globus pallidus. So now, as you have said, it is globus pallidus. We have come to know GABA is released by these structures. Now coming to glutamate. Okay, now you will tell for glutamate. Glutamate is released by which structures? Look at the picture and tell it by yourself. I'm just highlighting it. The locations where you can see glutamate. Here's glutamate. Here you can see the glutamate. So which are the structures releasing glutamate? Okay, quick answer it yourself. Which are the structures releasing glutamate? Yes, as Shiva was telling, it's subthalamic nucleus. There's another, okay, other one, it is a part in the basal ganglia. Apart from basal ganglia, two more structures are there. Yeah, very good. Rapid answers, very good. It is cerebral cortex and thalamus also. Okay, fine. So, cerebral cortex and thalamus. And also the subthalamic nucleus. Okay. Only one more is left, which is not in the picture. So, I'll tell it by myself. So, ACH is released by substantia nigra and striatum. Okay, so it's not shown in the picture, so I'm telling it now. With what you have said me, let us fill this tabular column, or let us fill this text box. Okay, so dopamine is released by substantia nigra. Then GABA is released by you can see the picture, or you can recollect yourself and tell. It is, I'm putting the short form, substantia nigra, pars compacta, and the other one, wait, GABA is released by, right, so it is released by the globus pallidus GP and also by striatum. Okay, then coming to glutamate. Glutamate is released by, as you mentioned, in the basal ganglia, it is the ophthalmic nucleus, and outside the basal ganglia, it is from the thalamus and from the cortex, right? So ACH, I just mentioned you, remember this, it is not shown in the diagram, it is from the striatum and from substantia nigra. Okay, so you need to remember this box, it's very, very important. Okay, right. So now every one of us have an idea about which are the neurotransmitters, from where are they released. Okay, there's another thing, just a small thing to remember here. These orange color lines are showing the excitatory impulses, okay, and the blue color ones are showing the inhibitory impulses. So the thing is, when we learned about the synapse, when we learned about neurotransmitters, we saw that there are two different types of neurotransmitters, the inhibitory and stimulatory neurotransmitters, right? Out of that, this glutamate is the only stimulatory neurotransmitter in this picture. Inhibitory is GABA. Then dopamine does both the activities. It can stimulate, at the same time it can also inhibit. So it does both the activities, right? So we have seen the most important part now. Okay. So a big part of basal ganglia is over. Now, rest of the things you just have to know. It's just a factual thing. Okay. So look at this picture. This is to show you the feedback circuits in the basal ganglia. So feedback circuit, there are three such feedback circuits. One is called the skeletomotor feedback circuit. Okay, skeletomotor feedback circuit. Now in the picture, where do you have it? The ones in the upper part, okay? here. Both of these are skeletomotor feedbacks. Then prefrontal feedback. Okay, Shiva, we'll share this chart in the webinar group. Actually, as this is in OneNote, I have to convert it into the PPT form and then I'll put it in the group. And the last time also, that also I'll convert it to the PPT and I'll put in the group. Okay, right. So prefrontal feedback in this picture, this one, that which I'm underlining or showing now, this is the prefrontal feedback. Then the one on the right side is the limbic feedback. Okay. Right, so these are the three important feedback circuits. So if such a question is asked, you can write this. What are the three feedback circuits in the basal ganglia? Skeletomotor, prefrontal, and limbic. Now there's another name for these circuits also. So the other name is putamen circuit. What is a putamen circuit? It is nothing but a circuit which involves putamen in it. So which circuit involves putamen? The skeletomotor circuit involves the putamen. So this is the putamen circuit. Then caudate circuit. So caudate nucleus is present in both the prefrontal and the limbic feedback circuits. So both of them are regarded as the caudate circuits, right? So this diagram in detail you could see it's given in LPR. Okay, so you just have to know that this is how the feedback circuit looks like. Okay, so you can read that by yourself. Then we'll see about the functions. Okay, this is another most important part, right? So in the first slide we saw about the tiger scenario, and we also saw about another scenario which is a car applying brake in a car when a baby crosses the car or crosses the road. Okay, right. So let us see where does both the functions come. Now we can divide the functions of basal ganglia into motor functions and non-motor functions. Now what are the motor functions? What are the non-motor functions? I've just simplified it into 4 plus 4. So first let us see this motor functions. So motor function, the first one is the subconscious movements or patterns of motor activity. Okay, so this is nothing but the same as what we saw when we were talking about driving a car. So when we're learning to drive a car, we will think consciously every single movement that we do. But as we get used to it, the pattern of movements gets registered in your brain, and the basal ganglia will use those patterns to perform the activity again, but subconsciously, right? Without your consciousness. So you will do it in an instant without thinking about what you're doing. So that is the most important function of basal ganglia, right? So first function is, you can remember it as car driving. It is not just car driving, a lot of things like anything that you learn, any skill based activity, like when you are learning to play an instrument, be it veena or violin. Initially it will be very difficult for you to know what are the movements you need to do next, one after the other, but when you keep practicing it, it will come in a flow, right? So all such skilled motor activities which have a pattern, right? So they are controlled by the subconscious part of the brain, that is the basal ganglia. Then regulation of the muscle tone. So muscle tone is regulated by basal ganglia. How is it? So when you are sitting without doing any activity, we all know that there is a residual muscle tone. That's why the muscle is not flabby but has some partial contraction. But at the same time, the muscle should not contract completely, right? So only when we do some activity, it should contract completely. Otherwise, it should be in the resting state with only partial muscle tone, right? So doing that activity is by the basal ganglia. So what basal ganglia is doing is, it will not let the muscles contract when you are at rest, right? So it makes the muscle to feel relaxed when you are at rest. Okay, so that's why when there is some problem with the basal ganglia, it will cause rigidity. So rigidity is an important symptom associated with the disorders of basal ganglia. So you can correlate that with this function of basal ganglia. Then to maintain the body posture, basal ganglia does another function. So how is it? By having connections with different parts of the brain. The last function is voluntary motor activity, which I can also say it is timing and scale. So for this also, you can remember one example as is given in Guyton. So we all know this very well. So when we are writing on a paper, the alphabets that we write, they'll be small letters, right? But the same thing when you do it on a board, we have to do the same thing, but on a larger scale. That is, the same motor activity on a larger scale. Nothing but the small letter has to be written as a big letter, but with the same features of A. So when you write A, those two vertical lines, which are slanted towards the center, right? The same feature should be represented on a larger scale on the board. So whenever you do that activity, remember it is your basal ganglia which is helping to do it. So people who are able to write neatly on the board and also on the paper in the same way have their basal ganglia functioning at its best. Okay, now coming to the non-motor functions. So the first non-motor function is cognition. Cognition is nothing but thinking. So for this, we could regard two things. One is cognitive control of motor activity. The other is just cognition. Now, what is cognitive control of motor activity? So here you can take the example of tiger, right? So when a tiger comes in front of you, you think that you need to run, right? So this thought which is controlling the motor activity in an emergency situation, it is by means of basal ganglia. So that comes under this function of basal ganglia. Then motivation. So this is one very important thing which everybody will be worried of. So everybody feels lack of motivation when they try to study, right? So that's actually by the basal ganglia. If your basal ganglia is functioning at its best, you will be highly motivated. Like you will not be distracted by anything. You will keep studying each day and you will be scoring great marks. You'll be learning a lot of things. You'll become a good doctor, right? So if you train your basal ganglia to concentrate well, then it's not just concentration. It will help you motivate when you're feeling low. Okay, when you're feeling like, okay, I'm not doing good. I'm not getting good results, even if I'm working hard. Still, if something pushes you to go ahead, then that is your basal ganglia, right? So next time when you feel low, then just tell yourself, basal ganglia, come on, let's stay active, and then it will boost you. Okay, it will boost you to become motivated, right? Then the other thing is mood. Moods are also having an influence by the basal ganglia. Then arousal. Arousal is nothing but waking up. So waking up in the sense, it is the main function of reticular system, reticular activating system. So as basal ganglia is having connection with the reticular activating system, it is called, it is said to have this function of arousal or waking up. All right. So let us see this next slide. Disorders of the basal ganglia. Right. So to remember this, just keep this one thing in mind. Abulia. Wilson parks the cab in Abulia. Okay. You should not ask me what is Abulia and all. Okay. Just imagine it is a place. Okay. So Wilson parks cab in Abulia. Now what is it? Wilson is to indicate Wilson's disease, right? Wilson's disease is otherwise called hepatolenticular disease, right? Then Parks. Parks refers to the Parkinson's disease. Okay, Parkinson's disease is otherwise called paralysis agitans. Then cab. In cab, the C represents the chorea, A represents athetosis, and B represents balism or hemibalismus. Okay, if balism is on one side, it is called hemibalismus, right? And then abulia refers to abulia. Abulia is another disorder, right? So these are the disorders you need to keep in mind. There's another disorder called kernicterus. We'll just have a word about it in the last. But now you need to remember these disorders. So just remember Wilson parks the cab in Abulia. Now let's see one by one. First, Wilson's disease. What is Wilson's disease? It's actually a metabolic disorder in which there is accumulation of the copper in the body. Copper is a mineral which is present on a very minimal level in the body, but the same copper, when it gets accumulated inside the body, it will cause lot of disorders, lot of diseases, lot of small changes in the tissues of the body, which can be together called as Wilson's disease. Okay, so Wilson's disease is not only a disease of basal ganglia, it affects multiple parts in the body. So that's why the other name is hepatolenticular, mainly the liver and the lenticle. Lenticle is the lenticular nucleus that we saw. Okay, so both of these are the important structures affected. Right. So in Wilson's disease, there is copper accumulation. So that's what you need to remember. And in the lenticular part, when there is a problem with the lenticular part due to the deposition of the copper, these are the two symptoms you will see: muscular rigidity and tremor. So if you can remember, I mentioned in the motor functions of the basal ganglia, it regulates the muscle tone. So when that goes off, it causes rigidity. Then comes tremor. Okay. So this picture is to show you Wilson's disease is just the deposition of copper in different tissues of the body. On a major scale, it affects the liver and the lenticular part of the central nervous system. That is the lenticular nucleus. And here's another thing which is interesting, but you don't need it here in basal ganglia. But once you learn this Wilson's disease in biochemistry, you will see this case of Fleischer rings. Okay, these are those copper rings in the eye. Okay. Second one is paralysis agitans. If you can remember this person with whom we saw in the beginning, he's a patient of Parkinson's disease. Okay. So this Parkinson's disease, again, what you need to know is it's because of the deficiency of dopamine. Okay, deficiency of dopamine, or it's because of increased acetylcholine level in the basal ganglia. Both of these cause Parkinson's disease. Now, what you need to remember is the symptoms are RAT. So what is RAT? It's a mnemonic for rigidity, akinesia, and tremor. Okay, rigidity, akinesia, and tremor. Okay, done. Then coming to the third one. Third one is chorea. So chorea is nothing but, it is named because of its symptoms. Okay, it's jerky movement of the limbs and the orofacial muscles. We saw chorea and athetosis, right? I mean, we mentioned chorea and athetosis. So what is important is both of them have a similar cause, but the symptoms that they show is different, and the part which they affect is different. Okay, so chorea, there is jerky movements of the limbs and orofacial muscles. In athetosis, it involves the fingers, toe, and tongue. It is the inability to fix these muscles in one position. Okay, so that is athetosis. So in chorea, we have two types called Huntington's chorea and the Sydenham's chorea. So Huntington's disease, we would have heard of it. It is an autosomal dominant disease. Okay? In that, chorea is a manifestation. Then Sydenham's chorea, that is seen in children when there is rheumatic fever. Okay, because of rheumatic fever, and there is chorea, we call it Sydenham's chorea. Okay, so in chorea, which is the part affected? So because it's C, remember it is caudate nucleus. Okay, GABAergic neurons are destructed. So GABA is released by striatum, as we saw before in the previous slides, right? So chorea is helpful. I mean, chorea is a condition where these GABAergic neurons are affected or degenerated, and especially it involves the caudate nucleus. Now, athetosis, the same cause. The GABAergic neurons are destructed, but here it involves the putamen part of the striatum. Okay, right. Then balism. So subthalamic body of Lewis or subthalamic nucleus. Okay, B body balism. Remember it that way. Okay, so it is the subthalamic body of Lewis or subthalamic nucleus which is affected. Okay, now what is this? It is a white flinging involuntary movement of the extremities of opposite side. So this phrase itself is enough for you to understand how this condition will be. And finally, abulia. So abulia is a condition which affects the caudate nucleus, but on a minimal scale. If it affects on a large scale, then that is causing chorea. So some small lesions in the caudate nucleus causes abulia. Abulia is lack of insight or motivation. So they never feel like doing anything. They feel like just sitting for no reason. Okay, they will not get this initiative of doing anything, right? So all of these conditions, you can just Google and see how these conditions would look like. You can see the clinical features, though they are not important for your physiology. Just to get a good understanding of the clinical features that you could see in these conditions, just Google it after the session or before tonight. Just Google it so that you will know and retain it better. Okay, so yes, so we have finished off all the things about the basal ganglia. Now let's have a small revision. Okay, so the same picture which I showed you in the beginning. Now you're going to answer me. So as fast as you answer, we'll end up the session. So in this structure or in this part of the brain, you need to tell me what represents 1. What represents 1, what represents 2, what represents 3, and what represents 4 and 5. So those are the 5 components of the basal ganglia. Or when I send the PPT, I just send the slide so that you can practice. Now I'll just tell it by myself or it's getting late. Okay. So one is caudate nucleus. 2 is the medial part, which is Globus Pallidus. 3 is putamen. 5 is the subthalamic body of Lewis or subthalamic nucleus. 4 is substantia nigra. Okay. Then let us see the neurotransmitters. This one, I think you can tell it, but I do not know if you can remember it now itself. By practice, you will remember it. So now I'll just tell it by myself. Just observe, try to recollect yourself. So regarding neurotransmitters, the nigro, if it starts with all these are prefixes, okay? Nigrostriate, pallidostriate, or striatocortical. I'm sorry, striatonigral, and the madri, these are prefixes. So whenever you get this prefix, remember these are the neurotransmitters in that connection. So when it is nigro, it is dopamine, right? When it is pallido, it is GABA, okay? It is GABA. Striato is also GABA. Subthalamic is glutamate, right? Then cortico and thalamic. So those 4 are parts of the basal ganglia. Then the ones outside are cortico. Cortico is glutamate, and your thalamus is also glutamate, right? So that's about the neurotransmitters. You need to keep this in mind. So before going for an exam, you can just revise this neurotransmitters name alone. So which part releases what. Then coming to lesions, Wilson's disease affects the lenticle of the basal ganglia, lenticular nucleus. Right? Then Parkinson's affects what? Which part? So it affects on a larger scale the entire basal ganglia, but it's mainly because of the degenerative change involving the acetylcholine pathway, or I could say it is caudate nucleus. So when there is excess dopamine, excess ACH or less dopamine, then that is causing Parkinson's. Chorea, as it is C, you can remember it is caudate nucleus. Athetosis, the same cause, but it occurs in the putamen. Balism, as it is B, I told you to remember this body. So what is that body? Subthalamic body or subthalamic nucleus, subthalamic body of Lewis or subthalamic nucleus. Then Abulia, it is also involving caudate, but it is a small lesion. Okay, these are the ones. So if you can just revise these 3, you need to know the components, you need to know the neurotransmitters, you need to know the lesions. So if you revise these 3 before an exam, you can write it really well. Right. So here's the list of important questions for you. The basal ganglia as a 10 mark, it's very important in physiology. Then short notes also, there have been repeated questions from that. Then 1 mark is also asked in this particular topic. Okay, like spasticity, rigidity. Okay. So that's it for today, guys. So if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comment box. Right. And yeah, we'll share that PPT in the webinar group before today evening, and you can have a look at that also. Yep. So thank you, guys. We'll end up the session here.